Hello everyone, welcome to my Dead Space remake, hard difficulty, no damage walkthrough. This is chapter 7, Into the Void, and I am very angry with this chapter right now. I like this chapter more than chapter 6, but my attempt to do this entire chapter without using an autosave was completely fucked by a bug that the developers somehow missed. And I don't understand how anyone in Q&A could miss this kind of major bug that occurs when you're planting the SOS beacon on the asteroid. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, after you destroy all of the interior tethers and then you destroy the exterior tethers, when you're trying to get back inside after you've destroyed the exterior tethers, there is a death barrier bug that can happen if you try to go inside too quickly. And what's happening is the hitboxes on the rings are somehow still active, even though you've technically disabled the rings. And the rings I'm talking about are the rings that circle the asteroid and that you have to use stasis on when you're trying to go outside. But somehow, those rings were still active, even though I technically disabled them. And so when I tried to go back inside, I fucking died. I have it as a blooper. This is the only blooper that was worth saving for this video. And I was so pissed off to have almost 30 minutes of gameplay completely fucked by a bug like that. I was not going to restart the entire chapter again, thanks to some programming error that the developers somehow missed. I was not going to put up with it. I instead just reload the autosave and just continue from there, because where the autosave puts you, it pretty much achieves the same kind of outcome like it would have had I just gone through the chapter normally. So I just went with that, and then after that I made a manual save, and then I did the hunter sequence, and I was able to do chapter 7, but I was just so pissed off. Like, I cannot believe that anyone could miss this kind of issue. It doesn't make any sense. Like, what the fuck was Q&A doing when they were playtesting that section? Were they really just taking such a slow time trying to get inside of the building? I don't understand. Like, I feel like 99% of individuals could easily come across this kind of bug involving a death barrier when you're talking about the rings on the asteroid. It makes no sense how barely anyone could discover it and just fix it. And it makes even less sense how the hitboxes on the rings could still be active even after you've disabled them. It's so retarded on so many levels. But ignoring that, let's just talk about Chapter 7. So, Chapter 7 isn't too bad. Like I said, I do like the flow to the gameplay a bit more. I mean, obviously it's not on the same degree as Chapter 2, but there are definitely some intelligent designs put in place with the way they've designed certain enemy spawns, and also with how you use impalement devices or fans from previous areas to give you an advantage for future encounters. That stuff I definitely like. Oh, this is a weird texture error. For some reason, the flames aren't showing up, but they are there. And somehow the swarm is able to get past the flames, so I have to use my flamethrower again. This spawn, a pregnant spawns, and I use an explosive canister to get rid of it, then use the flamethrower because the explosive canister will cause the pregnant to spawn the swarm. I then take care of this enhanced necromorph, and then I grab one of his spikes. When you get further into this hallway, a leaper and a female necromorph will spawn, so you've got to use the audio to your advantage, and they will spawn behind you depending on where your camera is. So here is the female necromorph. That was a mistake, but I said before that the enemies are invulnerable when they're in the middle of that drop-down animation, but that's not the case. So I was able to kill that female necromorph thanks to the damage I was able to stack from hitting it with the blade. And then that leaper came into play, so then I was able to take care of it. This guy always spawns from this location, so I'm just going to use the explosive canister and some other impalement devices to my advantage, and I killed him with one of the swarm bodies, which was pretty funny. But he's dead, and now we're going to move on. So, I don't remember what this chapter was like in Dead Space 1, but I have memories of this sequence being pretty bad in Dead Space 1, or just the mechanics weren't that functional when you were trying to do this sequence where you have to destroy all of these meteorites by using the beam that's in the center of this area. But I feel like the remake version is a lot better. So when you destroy 2 of these meteorites, a bunch of leapers and lurkers will spawn, but I'm going to use that to my advantage. As long as I wait for the leapers and the lurkers to spawn inside this room, I can then fall back to this doorway over here and use the flamethrower to bottleneck the spawn, because a narrow doorway like this is perfect for the flamethrower's firewall effect. So there's the first leaper, so I'm going to use the firewall effect. There's a lurker as well, so it's going to get damaged by the fire as well. When you're using the flamethrower against lurkers, if you don't place the firewall directly on the lurker, or even when you do so, lurkers do this recoil animation where they take a step backwards, just wincing from the pain elicited by the fire. And that can allow them to get out of the firewall, but the same cannot be said for necromorphs and leapers. So you might need to use a couple of firewalls in order to deal with these enemies, but it's worth it in the end. And thanks to the explosive canisters that I've saved in this room, I'm going to be able to use them to my advantage to deal with the next spawn that occurs. And this spawn, you'll want 2 explosive canisters on this part right over here, because when we restore gravity, the enemies are going to cut you off on both sides. But I'm also going to cut them off by using the firewall effect of the flamethrower. So I restored gravity, there's a spawn on my left, and there's a spawn to my right. So I always use the explosive canister on this guy first, and because I use the explosive canister, the swarm's going to spawn from his stomach, so I use the flamethrower, and that also keeps the other necromorphs away. And while they're busy being obstructed by the flames, I'm going to use the other explosive canister to deal with the rest of the enemies. And these other enemies are exploders, so if there are any exploders near other enemies, that's great, because then the explosion will kill them. So pay attention to the number of enemies in the sequence, and you'll be able to do this encounter correctly. And then I'm going to take the time to stomp the bodies, get some supplies, and when you push forward, you are going to trigger another spawn. And somehow, using a necromorph blade, I was able to instantly kill an armored necromorph. Oh, and that's right, guys. This is where we first encountered the armored necromorphs, and the armored necromorphs are one of the most bullshit necromorph types in the game. Because how they work is, they pretty much have armor around their entire body, except for the arms that have the blades that come out of them. So the game practically forces you to shoot the blades only. And the HP on this enemy doesn't make any sense. So, for one thing, it's able to completely ignore the firewall effect. It will not be stunned by the firewall, which makes no sense. And also, in the other Dead Space games, the armored necromorphs were treated like basic necromorphs, but they just have armor. So their HP and their stuns were on par with that of the normal necromorphs. But for some reason, this remake treats the armored necromorphs as if they're special, almost like the enhanced necromorphs. So they have a little bit more HP, they're resistant to the firewall effect, and they elicit stuns very differently to the other necromorphs. I don't really understand this, and these kind of factors can make the armored necromorphs one of the most annoying enemy types in the game with their ability to cheat. Oh, and this right here, prioritize that infector, and then take out this infector. Take out both of them with the pulse rifle mines, and then there's a guardian to the right, but he's completely optional. And I don't know why, but even when I use the flamethrower against this guy, it doesn't instantly kill him. It's very weird. So that's why I just choose to run past him. But I have to contend with him when I backtrack back to this room, because the Guardian babies are still active. So given the fact that the enemies, when they fire projectiles on this game, they're firing at the path you're moving rather than directly at you, most likely you're at risk for getting hit. So you gotta bear that in mind when you are backtracking back to this room. But this spawn, there are a couple of Guardian babies and 2 female necromorphs, and the location of these enemies is always the same. So first it's a Guardian baby on the left, then you have a Guardian baby and a female necromorph, and you can take them out with the explosive canister. There's a Guardian baby on the left, and then this explosive canister, I use it against the female necromorph that spawns on the left, and that is the end of the sequence. And I specifically recall in the original Dead Space that there were way more enemies for this sequence. And this was one of the worst parts of the game because of the overwhelming number of enemies, not to mention the hitboxes on these Guardian babies when you were shooting them was pretty bad. Like, I get so many moments in this remake as well where I'm shooting the tentacle that is protruding from the Guardian baby, and my shots aren't registering on it. And it's only when I aim for the base of the tentacle that's actually connected to the body that I seem to get instant kills most of the time. But they should have ironed out the hitbox on that better, or maybe it's the plasma cutter's hitbox, I don't know. But taking one of these explosive canisters with me, I'm going to use it against this guy, and then use the blades from this guy in order to stun this enhanced necromorph, and then finish him off with the flamethrower. After this, there's going to be one necromorph that will try to attack Nicole. Use the blades to your advantage to kill this guy, and then another necromorph will spawn on your side. So be ready to deal with them. I'm going to use the pulse rifle mines against this guy because, again, when you're using the pulse rifle mines against basic necromorphs and you shoot them in the chest, they will die instantly. And I know my pulse rifle is slightly upgraded, but trust me, the base version of the pulse rifle can instantly kill basic necromorphs as well as the armored necromorphs if you aim the mine for their chest. And keeping that in mind, you'll be able to dispatch any of these annoying enemies if there are any of them in later encounters. But we have picked up the SOS beacon, and we'll be able to get out of here. We have to turn off the gravity in this next room, and then deal with 2 of the Guardian babies if we're going to get out of here. There are other Guardian babies active, but I think they only activate via proximity, so you have to get close to their spawns in order for them to activate. But there is one Guardian baby active when you first enter this room, so get rid of him, disable the gravity, and then as you're moving forward, this pustule is going to explode and a Guardian baby will be active. And look at this right here. The actual hitbox of the pustule is obstructing the hitbox of the Guardian baby, so that right there was pretty dangerous. Although that has never really happened to me where I've been hit in the process trying to hit that Guardian baby, but still exert caution nonetheless. And watch this. Look at that right there. I narrowly avoided that projectile from the Guardian baby. Like I said, backtracking through that room when the Guardian is active is dangerous because of the Guardian babies that are spawned. And this right here, if the necromorphs you killed in this elevator have their blades intact, you'll be able to use them to your advantage to dispatch these 2 lurkers. And then pay attention to where this leaper is, because it's random where he spawns, and then use the firewall effect to kill him. Very cool how the firewall effect is able to cling onto surfaces. It's not just the floor, it clings onto walls as well, which is really awesome. So I'm able to dispatch that leaper, and then we have this armor guy. But look at him. He's going right through the firewall. He should have been stunned by that, but they're just resistant to the firewall for some reason, and it's bullshit. It makes no sense. But I'm able to use stasis to freeze him, and then dispatch him by taking out his arms. And with that all done, that's the last time necromorphs will attack you on the elevator. But I've left this in because there's a random possibility that you can be attacked by enemies in this chapter. It's in this corridor, as well as in other corridors. When you're going to this room over here, there's always an enemy that spawns. Sometimes it's a pregnant, other times it can be a necromorph. I'm not too sure what other enemy types can appear here when you're coming back into this room again after doing that elevator fight. But I get a normal necromorph right over here, so I'm able to finish him off with a stomp. I love the fact that the stomp is still useful in these later chapters. I feel like in Dead Space 2 and Dead Space 3, the stomp eventually lost a lot of utility in the later chapters, but in this game, the stomp is still very useful all the way through the game, and I really like that. I like how they don't just forget about the stomp in this remake compared to the other games. I mean, you can't really say the same with Dead Space 1 because the stomp on that game is fucking atrocious and shouldn't even exist. Dead Space 2, a little bit different. And then with Dead Space 3, I can't even recall when the stomping is ever useful because of how much the enemies don't flinch on that game. But I go to interact with that bench, but I don't have any power nodes, and when I interact with that bench, it spawns this guy, so be careful of him. And then this room coming up, there are going to be 2 of the exploders that spawn when you get close to this mechanism in the middle of the room. So there's one, and then the second one is going to be on the other side. There's going to be a 3rd exploder as well when you take the battery with you into this room. Oh, and thank you, Kinesis, for being very sensitive on your detection. mean, look at that. Why the fuck would I want to pick up a fire extinguisher? I know they can do damage to you, but what utility do they have against necromorphs? It makes no sense. Like, there's so many things that I wish you didn't have the ability to grab in this game because they're fucking useless. Oh, and be careful right here. An armored necromorph can spawn, and he did right here, but I always get on the elevator very quickly before he has a chance to attack. But he will be a factor to consider when I'm backtracking back to that room, because he will be there. And then this is the part. You see this? You see this trim right here? That was me reloading my autosave because of the stupid bug that I encountered where I got killed by a death barrier somehow. But I'm gonna bring this vent with me. I tried to bring the pipe as well, but in my previous save file, I took the pipe with me into this room, and the checkpoint must have triggered after I placed it in this room because it's nowhere to be seen. But if you have that pipe with you, you'll be able to instantly kill these black leapers, and that's another good way to kill them as well. And I can't believe the thought never occurred to me in the previous encounters with this room, but you can use the fan to sever the arm of the black leaper when it's on the wall, and it will instantly die. That right there is awesome. I mean, this part of the game is definitely a lot better than how it was in the original Dead Space, but that bug I got was so unforgivable and so unacceptable. How the fuck did it escape the developer's eyes? But all you're doing right here is using stasis on these tethers and destroying the power coupling. It's a serious circuit, so destroying one will completely disable all of the circuits on the tethers. But I don't use stasis on these rings. I hug the left-hand side and just wait for an opening. And then right here, these tethers, you've got to destroy these tethers while there are lurkers around, so you've got to keep moving. But I destroy that tether, plant the SOS beacon, and then take out this tether. And then this is where the bug can happen, so you've got to wait right here. I believe as soon as the AI says untrained personnel, then you're free to go through. But right here, when passing through, I was killed by nothing. You're gonna see it in the blooper section. It's so fucking bullshit. And just imagine if I was on impossible difficulty, where when you die, you go back to the very beginning of the game. It's that kind of bullshit that makes me hate permadeath in every single game. Only an arrogant developer who thinks that their game is so perfect when it's not would ever consider the possibility of putting permadeath into a higher difficulty. But that's what permadeath does. It makes these kind of bullshit designs even more bullshit. That's all it does. It just magnifies the negativity that is created when you see these bugs happening on a permadeath run. This is why checkpoints are needed in games. This is why checkpoints are a privilege. Checkpoints are fucking mandatory for games, because games are always going to be filled with poor designs like what I'm describing and what you'll see in this blooper section. Anyone who thinks that checkpoints aren't a thing that should be in games, they are a fucking alien and they aren't human in thought whatsoever. They have no brains. They should not be alive in this world if they think that checkpoints are bad for games. The fucking retards. And also, this room right here, I don't like. So this is the room where you encounter the hunter, and you have to wait an arbitrary amount of time for Daniels to open the manual release so that you can get out of here. And while she's doing this, other enemies will support the hunter. There are 3 enemies, but only 2 of them will spawn into this room right now. So I take out all of the hunter's limbs, and then I use a pulse rifle mine to deal with this first necromorph that spawns. The hunter regenerates, so I'm going to use stasis, and I'm completely out of stasis right now. I recommend bringing at least 2 stasis packs for this encounter, because this encounter is badly designed. It's just a very small room. There are so many opportunities for the enemies to do very cheap attacks on you, and it's just a stasis fest. Like, you've got to fire stasis like crazy if you're going to survive. The hunter is down, he's busy regenerating, so I'm going to take the time to use the manual release. I'm out of stasis, so I'm going to use the stasis capsule right there. And this guy is always going to cock block you when you're trying to get out of here, so I use the vent that is behind him to actually take off his legs, and then I stomp him, which is very risky. I should have just shot him with the plasma cutter, but I just decided to save up on some ammo. But we move on, and this part, the hunter's going to spawn right there, and other enemies will just spawn to the sides, but you just gotta make a mad dash to the elevator, and as soon as you get inside of the elevator, this will be the end of this encounter. And the only enemies left for this sequence are just going to be a bunch of divider parts, but I'm just going to run past them right here, because they will not have time to catch up to me. There's an invisible barrier blocking the door for some reason, so that was pretty close. But once you get over here and you get inside of the tram and get to the bridge, that will be the end of this chapter. But here is the infamous death barrier glitch I got. So watch this, watch this. Look at that. Look at that fucking bullshit. I'm just trying to pass through normally, but because of the fact that I tried to go in quickly after turning off that exterior tether, the game decided to kill me because it thought the rings were still active when they aren't. The rings disable when you destroy all the tethers, so how could the hitbox possibly still be active? That's one of the most bizarre hitboxes I have ever seen, and it should not exist. How the fuck could anyone not see this on the Q&A department? And again, imagine if I was playing on impossible difficulty, to have my run of impossible difficulty end right there because of a fucking bug. It's so unacceptable for this to be the case. But moving past that, that is the end of this chapter. Stay tuned for the future chapters. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.